Hello there, folks. We are back on another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. Today we have the honor of being joined by Katie Jordan. She is the CEO for the American Occupational Therapy Association, and I'm going to dive into my line of questioning for her by just asking kind of a standard question here on 6 Degrees of Associations. How did the association industry find you, or how did you find it?
Thanks, Casey. I'm really happy to be here. So thanks for having me. I am an occupational therapist, and so my first exposure to the association world was as a member of my professional association. So I've been an occupational therapist for over 20 years, and I've been involved in my professional association that entire time, from membership through becoming a practitioner member, and then becoming a volunteer leader. So very early on in my career, I felt like I needed to better understand and advocate for occupational therapy's scope of practice and ensure that our billing and reimbursement reflected that full scope of practice. So I became AOTA's advisor to the American Medical Association Relative Value Update Committee Healthcare Professional Advisory Committee. It's a really long acronym. It's the AMA RUC HICPAC. And in that capacity, I also served as on the research subcommittee, the practice expense committee, and some other areas for about 12 years. And as a result of that, I did a lot of meetings with CMS, with the Department of Health and Human Services, and I served as a technical expert, a subject matter expert on technical expert panels. So I engaged in health policy and advocacy, both at the state, local, and then at the national level. And that was all through my state professional association and my national professional association. So that was really my lens that got me started in professional associations. And then later I joined the AOTA board of directors. And that was during the pandemic. So navigating that crisis gave me a pretty significant education on the breadth and depth of professional associations. And I learned a lot of aspects about associations that I didn't realize until I served in that role. And that got me really excited to learn more. I got to know the experts and professionals that worked for the association. I had seen their names on things before, but I really got to know them over that time that I served on the board, and that became more real. And then I was on the board of directors when an interim CEO was chosen. I wasn't on the search committee, but I had some indication of what was happening throughout that process. And I knew some of it, but not all of it. And then when the permanent position was posted, at that point, my interest was really piqued, and I had a lot more exposure to the professional association. So I threw my hat in the ring, and I was selected as the permanent. I was announced in March of 2024 at our annual conference, and then I started in August of 2024. So it's been about 9 months at this point. My first week on the job was the annual ASAE meeting. So that was a little overwhelming, but amazing at the same time. So I kind of dove in head first and started building my network of association professionals, of mentors and peers and supporters. And I reached out to other association leaders that I knew to try to build up that support. And I met a lot of CEOs that were both association professionals and members of their profession or industry, and those that were association professionals, and that was their primary career focus. So it's a really interesting world because you have both, coming into that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an occupational therapist by trade, I'm really curious what drives your passion as a professional. I'm assuming patient care, making an impact, that type of thing. And, asking what drives you as your passion as a professional. I also am curious, is that what led you to make the jump to associations versus the more direct patient care? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So when I became an occupational therapist, I was really interested in working one-on-one with people. I mean, I think most practitioners have that, healthcare practitioners have that, where they want to make a difference in people's lives, and they want to see that impact and be able to help people. I mean, that was really why I got into the field. when I was newer in my career, I went some different ways. Like I didn't necessarily go into more of a traditional occupational therapist position. I served in concierge medicine. I was part of that team. I worked in health promotion and wellness, and I did some more, more traditional roles that you would see an occupational therapist in. Like I worked in mental health and I worked in acute care and rehabilitation. But what I found pretty quickly is that I felt like for me, I could make a bigger impact in different levels in an organization. So I quickly moved into a management position and then a director position. And I was using the same skills that I use as an occupational therapist. So analyzing what the challenges are and working with people to remove barriers and understand the context and the problems and helping people find meaning in what they do every day, which is what occupational therapists do. But I was doing that more on a larger scale. So working with, staffs of healthcare practitioner rather than individual one-on-one patients. And it was the same in volunteer leadership. So I felt like I can make a difference at a different level that's going to impact a lot of consumers and a lot of practitioners and a lot of people in the occupational therapy community. And so I felt like I was still acting like a therapist. It was just on a different scale. It was a lot of the same skills, but just applied at a different level.
Absolutely. And we had on this program Justin Moore, who is the CEO of the American Physical Therapy Association, and he has a similar path to the association world as you. He started as a physical therapist by trade and then gradually worked his way to becoming the CEO of his professions association. So I asked this question to him, and I will ask it to you as well. What do you think are some of the advantages of being the head of your association and having the background of being a professional in that field, where we don't see a lot of that all that much in associations? Sometimes they are just a career association professional who becomes a CEO, but you've had that background and so did Justin. So I asked to him if he could just tell us about some of the advantages of that. And then of course, some of the things that you're at a disadvantage with that.
Yeah, and Justin's wonderful. Thank you for that. What's interesting too, before I answer that is, there's three associations that are kind of colloquially referred to as the Tri-Alliance, because we do a lot of work together, which is my association, the American Occupational Therapy Association, Justin's American Physical Therapy Association, and the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association, or ASHA. The three of us are kind of the rehabilitation professional, kind of group that sticks together. We have a lot in common for advocacy and health policy. And I think it may be the first time in history, you'll have to fact check me on it, but I think it may be the first time that all three associations, CEOs are practitioners of their profession. So we have that sort of unique bond right now in time, which is interesting too. In answer to your question, I think I might say something similar to what Justin shared, which is credibility. I think that when you are a practitioner, you speak that language, and it helps to bring people along and help them feel like you understand what they're going through. And having worked as a practitioner, I also worked as an academician. I taught in academic programs and in clinical programs. And I've been on the advocacy and health policy side. I've been on the private practice side. And, so I can understand the pain points that our practitioners and our researchers and, our faculty are facing in their day-to-day lives. So I'm not coming at it from a theoretical perspective. I lived it, and I know what it is. And so I think that helps. I think with any profession, you have your own language and, perspective. And so I can speak that language and translate sometimes, between worlds. And I think that that's helpful. So I think there's an authenticity and a credibility there that helps. To a certain amount, like gratitude. I appreciate their struggles. I appreciate what they're bringing when they're members and what they're bringing when they're volunteers, because I know how much it is to give up, to serve, in that capacity and give up your time, and serve your professional association in that way. And I did that for a long time. So I think that connection as well. Downside to that, I think sometimes because I understand and I appreciate where they're coming from, it is hard to sometimes go a different direction than people want you to go. I think, they feel that connection, that you'll always agree with them because you have the same background, and I think that sometimes you have to say no because it's not the right time for that, or, and saying no to someone who's really passionate and who you otherwise agree with is challenging. But, timing is important too. Sometimes it's just not the right time or space for that. Other downsides, maybe it's this, I don't know if this is a downside, but occupational therapy is somewhat of a small world, not that small. There's about 250,000 practitioners and students that we represent through the association, but you cross paths with people in different contexts. And I think sometimes people think of you in time sort of memorialized in that context. So people may think of me as a practitioner and not a CEO because that's the time that they knew me. Or they may think of me as an academician and, not a CEO. So we continue to evolve, and, a better version of ourselves is right around the corner. I really believe that people continue to grow throughout their entire life. And so I've learned new things and done different things throughout my career, but people may know you from that one point in time in which you interacted with them. So I think that can be somewhat challenging in a universe that's, contained.
Those are great. Those are great responses. And, with such a large community of addressable people to be in your association, you just said 250,000 practitioners roughly. And we know that all those practitioners benefit from, public policy wins, so to speak, and things like that. But I was curious, what is your kind of pitch, so to speak, to get people to be a member and not just, just be someone that benefits from all the great hard work you're doing on the Hill or something like that? Like, what's your pitch to belong?
Yeah. So, well, you just nailed it right at the end, Casey. It's belonging. So, people come to the association for lots of different reasons. They come for continuing education to maintain their license or their certification. They come for professional development, for career advancement, or just, they want to switch to another area of practice and they need some skills to do that. Or board certification or micro credentials. They come to network and to build their community. They, to find mentors, to find people that they can mentor, to give back, for volunteer service, to be part of our governance, to have a voice in the profession. And like you said, everyone benefits from the advocacy. I mean, when we have a win, it benefits all the practitioners and students, not just the members. But the members are about 20%. That's our market share. And so it's 20% that are working for the 100%. And so, we're constantly pushing that value of membership and what the value proposition is, by pushing the things that connect us. And some of those really big wins, especially on the national level that kind of impact everyone, we try to get that out, as, early and often as possible. But I think what it comes down to really is belonging. And the professional association is where, no matter what your individual perspective is, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, your association is where you belong, and it's where you have a voice and an impact in your career. And, there's no other place that you have that capacity. So that's really the thing that I think we emphasize more than anything. And that's what I've always felt is this is where you belong.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a couple questions I wanted to touch on that I sent you in advance. So I definitely want to ask about like a mistake you've made, because I know I don't always get to this question when we interview folks, but I am curious because we could all benefit from learning from possibly your mistakes. So tell us about that.
There's been so many. I narrowed it down to one that's kind of more salient to me right now, and that is, at this point in my career, I feel like I've pushed myself in different directions, and I've had mentors that would hold up a mirror to me and say, you can do better, you can do something different here. And I've tried to be that for other people. I've pushed people in directions, and sometimes they don't want to be pushed. And even though they have the capacity to do something, it may not be what they want to do. And, they feel compelled to do it because I'm asking them, or because I'm creating this opportunity for them to do it. And sometimes that's, ended disastrously, where it just, it hasn't been the right thing for them. I want that for them so much. I want to give people opportunities to stretch and grow. Leadership, about 70% of leadership training is learning by doing. So you really have to just get in there, jump in with 2 feet and try things. I've never had a job that I didn't at least partially create my roles and responsibilities by, learning new things. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm finishing I just finished my 5th degree, which is my executive EMBA. And I love learning, and I love to kind of keep that pace going, but that pace and that perspective isn't universal. And so what I've learned from that is that I need to surround myself with people who have diverse perspectives and skills and experience that can advise me, and really challenge my assumptions. I can't be surrounded by people who think like I do in every aspect. Then I have this artificial echo chamber around me. And, leadership is lonely. So it can be tempting to isolate yourself. But, because as a leader, you have to do hard things like saying no to people and, letting people go sometimes. And that's really hard. And it's easy to surround yourself with people who are just going to agree with you. But, what I've learned is that that's just going to lead to more mistakes. And so it's better to have people around you that can strongly disagree, that can challenge your assumptions, that can tell you what you don't want to hear. I had to learn that the hard way, sometimes, but that's something that I try to keep in mind.
I asked you a tough one about mistakes. You got to be vulnerable when you answer that question. So let's switch it over to a little bit more of a fun one. What about something that doesn't show up on your LinkedIn page, doesn't show up on your CV, resume? Tell us about something interesting about you that we would otherwise not know.
Yeah. Okay. So, this is definitely not on my LinkedIn, but my background is as a professional dancer, and I worked in theater as a dancer. That was actually my first degree. It was in fine arts in dance, as an undergraduate. My parents were really, really nervous when I told them that's what my degree was going to be in. But I wouldn't trade it for the world, because dancing taught me a lot. It taught me how to be resilient, how to present myself, how to perform, and how to literally think on my feet. Dancing teaches you how to work in an ensemble, because that's the only way it works, so working on a team. And I think the arts, holds so many life lessons, and sometimes it doesn't get credit for all that it can teach us. And I carry that with me everywhere that I go, and how I move through the world, and how I present myself, and how I perform in different situations. Having a theater background is really, really valuable to me. And I use it all the time.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. It's like there's so many foundational skills that you learned in that are with you every day. And maybe it's hard to, sell that argument to someone who's really practical minded or thinking very like linearly or something like that. It's hard to make that argument, but I totally can relate to that. And I just had a cousin graduate high school who's going into dance, and I will have to share that clip or the full interview with her so she can totally understand that. That's awesome. I love that. When you transitioned from the practitioner into the association space, when you were a practitioner, you were a part of this association that you now lead. So did you get involved in ASAE for learning about the association industry, or was there any other type of, transitions or organizations like that helped you along your journey that were new to you when you became the association CEO?
Yeah. So there were two that I wanted to point out. So, ASAE was the first one, and that was the very first week that I was on the job in August of 2024 was their annual conference. And it was in Cleveland. So I went to that and it was completely overwhelming. The Association of Associations, it's just enormous. And, there's so many people to meet, so many important connections, education that goes along with that. I mainly just roamed around and talked to people, and that was really useful. I had, fortunately, the interim CEO at the time, was pretty well integrated into the ASE community. So he walked around with me and introduced me to people and kind of held my hand through the process, which was really helpful. And I've since, learned a lot and gone to some continuing education with them. And I'm going to go to the next, annual meeting, is in Los Angeles where I live. So that makes it really easy. And then the other one is CES, which is the Council of Engineering and Scientific Society Executives, which is not like an exact, like you wouldn't think necessarily health professionals may be in that, but basically, if there's any component of your mission that's STEM related, it fits. And so I went to their CEO meeting in January, and that was a really amazing connection to be with all of those CEOs and kind of hear the common challenges. And it really doesn't matter necessarily what the association is. We all face very similar things that cross over, all of them. And then I've gone to a few other things with different vendors that they've hosted, meetings and things that have allowed me to connect with other CEOs kind of in similar situations or kind of similar size groups. The other part with ASAE, I just joined, the Key Professional Association Committee, which is sort of like associations that are about the size of my association, maybe some larger, some smaller, and the CEOs of those associations. So it's a smaller, more intimate group, but again, very common interests, common challenges, common things to celebrate each other when we have wins, and that's been really helpful.
Well, before we wrap up here, I want to ask directly about what the mission statement is of your association. Tell me about that.
Okay. So the mission of the American Occupational Therapy Association is to advance occupational therapy practice, education, and research on behalf of the members, the profession, and the public through standard setting and advocacy. So it's pretty direct. It's what we do every day. And it's what the staff all work towards. It's what our volunteer leaders are an important part of. And when, to think about like belonging and connection, it's the one thing that unifies all of us is the mission of the association. We are also celebrating this year. We just launched our Vision 2030. We launched that at our annual conference, which is called Inspire. AOTA hosts the largest annual gathering of occupational therapy practitioners in the world. And so we're really privileged to host that every year. And we get attendance from not only our national association, but also international visitors that join us for that meeting. So this last year was in Philadelphia. Next year it'll be in Anaheim. But at the Philadelphia Inspire, we launched our AOTA Vision 2030, which is enriching life for all individuals in society through meaningful engagement in everyday activities. It's a broad, bold North Star vision that we're working towards.
Absolutely love that. And one thing we always do here on 6 Degrees of Associations, hence the name, we would love for you to give a shout out to someone in your community, could be an association CEO such as yourself, or just someone that's been a great professional mentor for you over the years, or someone you just want to just give a shout out to. Is there anyone in your community that you think the 6 Degrees of Associations podcast needs to hear from?
Yeah, thanks, Casey. So you mentioned Justin from APTA. That's one of mine for sure. I would also mention Vicki Deal Williams from the American Speech Language and Hearing Association, or ASHA. who I mentioned earlier. And then the other person is Deborah Ben Avram. She's the CEO of the Association for the Advancement of Blood and Biotherapies, and the chair of the KPAC committee that I spoke about earlier. So she would be another great person to talk to and hear from.
That is great stuff. Katie Jordan has been our guest today on 6 Degrees of Associations. She is CEO of the American Occupational Therapy Association. Katie, thank you so much for your time today and for all the wisdom.
Thank you, Casey. I appreciate it. Thank you for hosting.